Integration. 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 Integration into?
Integration.
Integration, integration, integration. There are two things you should know about integrating psychedelic experiences. One, it's really important that you do it. And two, nobody seems to know what the fuck integration actually is. Is it some mystical process achieved via meditation? Do you need to pay for a professional integration coach, or perhaps buy an online course to show you how to do it? No, it's actually not that complicated. So in this video, I'm going to unpack the topic of integration in a nice, simple, step-by-step way that hopefully cuts out the bullshit and gets to the point of what integration is, why it's useful, and how you actually do it. If that sounds of interest, then make yourself comfortable and let's demystify integration. So before we get into the nuts and bolts of integration, I will tell you why I felt it was important to make this video and why I think I'm qualified to talk about this. Also, I'm going to put timestamps in the description below, so if you don't want to listen to this preamble and just want to dive straight into the main topic, then feel free to skip this section. But there is some useful background information in here which will give a bit of context, so if you can just indulge me for a few minutes, that would be greatly appreciated. One of the current cash cows within the online space is to sell educational courses. In particular, self-help courses, and I've started to see more and more of this within the psychedelic space with people selling courses on topics like integration. Now, I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with the business model of selling courses, as long as it is good information for a reasonable price. But I have seen some of the stuff being put out there around the topic of integration, and honestly, it was pretty bad. Usually just some dude waffling about meditation with a side serving of new age bullshit without giving out any real practical advice. And all of this is coming from some wannabe internet entrepreneur who took mushrooms a few times and thinks that what they have to say is worth several $100s. Yeah, maybe not, mate. Now, I'm sure that there is some really good content out there from some good people, so I'm not saying all online integration courses are bullshit, or that there is zero value in paying a coach to guide you through this stuff. But I don't think it's particularly controversial to say that there are some people out there who are full of shit and are looking to cash in on the hot topic that is psychedelics. So my point is, it's a bit of a minefield. Also, my personal stance is that integration is a critical part of the psychedelic process. So the idea of locking this kind of information behind a paywall is counterproductive to my own objective of helping the psychedelic community become better. Because I want everyone to have the tools to integrate their experiences, not just those who can pay for it. So with that in mind, I consider content like this to be like a public service announcement. And if you do find some value in it, then you can support the channel via Patreon or direct donation, and the links for doing that are in the description below, but it's in no way mandatory. Further to what I say in this video, if you have a question or are struggling to integrate your own experience, then you are welcome to contact me on Discord, and I will help you out as much as I can in whatever way I can. And again, I do not charge for this stuff, so feel free to reach out. One last thing before we get into this topic is, who even am I and what makes me qualified to talk about this stuff? Well, if you're new here, my name is Rob. I've been working with psychedelics for over 30 years. I've probably got more experiences than I could possibly count at this point. I've met some amazing people from all corners of the community, from traditional shamans to neuroscientists, psychoanalysts, psychedelic facilitators and researchers, but most importantly, to ordinary people like you and me who have boots on the ground with these substances. And from all that, I put together this process of how to successfully integrate a psychedelic experience. And while that might sound incredibly mundane, that really is the core of what integration is. It's not about unlocking psychic superpowers or becoming enlightened. It's about bringing something back from those transcendent experiences and incorporating it into your life as a human being. And just to be clear, I'm not saying that this is the only way to integrate psychedelics, simply that this is what I do and it works for me. If you disagree, that's absolutely fine, and you feel free to share your own advice in the comments below so that everyone can benefit from it. Okay, I think that's enough background. Let's get into it. Now, integration as a process is actually pretty easy to understand, but I get the distinct impression that there are a lot of people out there who don't actually know what the word means in relation to psychedelics and are just too embarrassed to admit it. It's kind of like in the corporate boardroom. There are words that people like using because they project a certain image and make you sound intelligent. And since no one likes being that one person who asks for an explanation of what the word in question actually means, then it continues getting thrown around in ever more vague ways until it becomes some kind of buzzword, which is where I think we are today with integration. Hey bro, I was like tripping balls last night, man. Tripping so hard. Hey, cool. Is there anything in there that you think is worth integrating? Yeah. I integrated the fuck out of it. It was like peak integration, man. Yeah. Okay. And once something becomes a buzzword which no one understands, then bullshit swiftly follows. As an example of this, just go and look at the word quantum, which has basically been redefined into a word used by new age twats to explain literally everything. But hey, I'm all about cutting through the woo-woo, so let's break down what integration actually is. At its simplest level, integration is the act of taking an insight that we believe to be true and converting it into the actions necessary to make it part of our personal reality. Insight converted into action equals integration. Now, I fully appreciate that phrasing it like this makes me sound like one of those wanker life coaches that try and use catchy slogans to try and get you to buy their overpriced online course. But honestly, it's just the simplest way of explaining it. And it's not like I charge you $500 for this nugget of wisdom, so just cut me a bit of slack here. Now, in terms of psychedelics, the insight part is something that was revealed to us during the experience, which we absolutely believe to be true. I can only assume that if you're watching this, then you've got some idea of the kind of stuff I'm referring to. Like lose some weight, leave that toxic relationship, save the planet, or whatever. The scale or the content of the thing doesn't really matter. All that matters is that you believe that this should happen. This is something you need to do. As far as you're concerned, it is revelation, it is truth, or at least your personal truth. Now let's unpack this truth thing. You are only looking to make some kind of change because you believe this thing is true, right? I mean, just think about it for a second. If you didn't think this insight was true, then it wouldn't have any effect on you and you would dismiss it. Just as an example, if during one of my trips I had the idea that I could shit pure gold, then I'm not really going to put much thought into that once I sober up. It's not like I'm going to go and start fishing turds out of the toilet and checking them for golden nuggets, because I just don't believe that it's true. But if during a ceremony I had the insight that I need to spend more time with my kids, then I could feel that there is some truth there in that. I mean, it's obvious to me. I could feel it. And then the question becomes, what am I going to do about it? And I'm sure you guys have all had similar insights from your own experience where you knew that this message was important and that whatever that message was, you believed it. You believed it was true. And the integration part is about how you bring about that change into your reality. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that what you have come to believe is actually objectively true. And as we all know, there is plenty of room for delusion with psychedelics. So we'll discuss later on how we separate out the good insights from the not so good insights. But for the moment, let's just assume that the insight in question is reasonably wholesome and is worth cultivating. So, you have received this insight from the psychedelic realm and you absolutely believe it is true and you want to integrate it into your human experience. What next? Well, if you have something that you want to manifest within this everyday reality, then usually this will require some kind of action on your part. And the trick here is to work out what action is needed to bring about this change. It might be as simple as requiring action to actually do a thing, but more likely it will require a behavioural change. And as a result of that change in behaviour, then the thing you believe is true happens. So let's go with the example of losing some weight. And just to clarify, this is an extremely simplified example purely for the purpose of explaining this process. Usually this kind of insight would have far deeper implications around self-love, respecting the sacredness of your own body, all that stuff. So again, I'm grossly oversimplifying this, but just roll with me. So if I believe it is true that I need to lose some weight, like that is my lesson from the psychedelic realm, and as far as I'm concerned, it is an absolute truth which I wholeheartedly believe in, then the question becomes, what action do I need to take in order to bring about that physical transformation? Now the logic is fairly straightforward. I work out what kind of action is required, I then take that action, and if I successfully do that until I achieve my objective, then I will have integrated my experience. In this example of losing weight, it's very simple. Some kind of diet is in order, I'll lose weight, thus psychedelic concept has become physical reality and I have successfully integrated my experience. On the other hand, if nothing changes and I remain unhappy with my weight, then I have not integrated my experience. Now at its most basic level, and I've got to stress basic, that is it. But again, this is a grossly oversimplified example just to get the concept of what integration is across. Insight converted into action equals integration. And we don't even need to look at the world of psychedelics to see the framework of how this works, because most of us will have had experience of it in the form of a New Year's resolution. You know, we set an intention for the new year that we want to be true. We set out to accomplish it, and then usually we forget about it within about 2 weeks and then beat ourselves up about it. Now that in itself is an attempt at some kind of integration of the ideal we wish we were with the reality of who we are, and it's spurred into action by the catalyst of the new year. Psychedelic integration can be seen as an expansion of that New Year's resolution process, just with a much more effective catalyst, because that truth that we receive seems much more real and motivational, that it gives a greater chance of following through to some kind of success. And that's part of what makes psychedelics so useful, is that they really give us a kick up the arse to make us want to make these changes. Okay, so now we have the basic idea that psychedelic insights can be integrated into reality by the means of taking action. Cool. Now let's take it a step further. If we stick with that previous example of losing weight, then it seems like a very simple surface level thing. And so if we take it at face value, we might be missing the bigger picture. I mean, what's the meaning behind our desire for the physical change? Is there something there perhaps around self-love, taking better care of yourself, making that connection between a healthy body and a healthy mind? Further to this, maybe what was revealed to you isn't something you should simply take on face value, because as we know, psychedelics can be a little bit tricky, and so there's a reasonable chance that the idea you have in your head, which you think is of cosmic importance, is actually complete bollocks. So let's just pluck a random example out of thin air of someone who has the insight that they have messianic abilities to cure mankind of every disease and ailment, and their first impulse is to jump on social media and tell everyone about it. Yeah, maybe not the best idea in the world. You see, if you take some time for some structured introspection before you take action, then you can save yourself a lot of wasted energy and maybe avoid making a complete twat of yourself in the process. This is the first part of doing the work, which is a phrase that often gets thrown around in psychedelic circles because the work starts after the experience. It takes zero skill and discipline to get high on psychedelics and have a bombastic experience. Literally anyone can do it. And while the experience itself might be challenging, That's not the work. The work comes from what you do with the experience. After all, if you get spoon-fed some vision and you take it exactly as it seems, then that's not really doing any work at all, is it? That's basically just like watching The Matrix and coming out convinced the world is a simulation. Wow, that's amazing. Bravo. That's some real out-of-the-box thinking there, mate. However did you come to such a radical conclusion? Oh, it was in the movie you literally just watched. Oh, really? So how do you parse out the meaning behind the experience? Well, this is where contemplative exercises like meditation come in useful. But really, any activity that gives you space and clarity is just as valid. So going for a walk, or even just making a bit of quiet time to sit with yourself and really interrogate the experience. Ask yourself, what does this mean? Or what does this tell me about myself? Ask yourself if it's possible that what you experienced is completely false, and see how you feel about the answers that arise. Maybe think about ways you could test to see if it was true. And one of the best ways to explore the validity of such ideas is to bounce them off another person, someone you trust and respect, someone who'll listen to you without judgment and give you an honest response. It's also helpful if you're talking to someone that they have an understanding of the experience that you've just been through. They don't necessarily need to have done psychedelics themselves. They just need to understand that you have been through an extraordinary experience. This is especially useful when dealing with delusional ideas around being able to see the future, having paranormal abilities, or some kind of superpower. Explore together how you could show this ability to be true and have the courage to be able to accept the result if it's not so true. This kind of introspection I'm talking about, it really is an ongoing process, but it's most important here, before you take any action, because understanding the actual message will no doubt shape the actions that you subsequently take. As a general rule, you should not be making any life-changing decisions or make any public declarations within the first month after a powerful psychedelic experience. Because although you might feel you have perfect mental clarity, you probably don't. This is what's known as the afterglow effect. And the best thing you can do is just let things settle down before doing anything drastic. After all, if your insight is true and you have put the time into making sure it is true, then it will still be true in 1 month. So what is the harm in waiting? And if the very idea of waiting seems like a major problem and that you have to take action now, like right now, then that in itself should be a red flag that you are possibly in some kind of manic state and aren't thinking straight. Take your time, wait it out. The truth will happily wait for you. So to summarize this section, use introspection as part of your integration to really process these insights and work out the meaning and which parts, if any, are true. Do this over a period of at least 1 month, but the longer the better. So with all this in mind, let's update our mantra into insight filtered through introspection, converted into action equals integration. Now, there are a couple of things I want to say about introspection before moving on, and one is that there is a balance here between passive introspection and active introspection. And what I mean by that is there is some element of making time to let things naturally rise and fall within you. Thoughts, emotions, memories. Just give yourself the space for these things to occur. On the other hand, you don't just want to sit there in the lotus position, completely lost in your own ideas, because while this might have the aesthetic of introspection, there's a good chance that really you're just indulging your own bullshit. Use some mindfulness techniques to have some awareness of the things going on inside you, and then ask yourself what these things might mean. Have a dialogue with them, challenge them, look at them to see the meaning behind them. The flip side of that is that you shouldn't try and force things that aren't there. Like if you didn't get the careers advice you wanted from the experience, then don't try and impose something onto it that wasn't there. You need to find that balance. Finally, journaling can be incredibly helpful with this process. Now, often when people talk about journaling in relation to psychedelics, then they just make some vague statements as if a notebook somehow solves every psychological problem you'll ever face. So let me give you a specific example about how it can help. Now, before you take psychedelics, it's a good idea to have an intention. So write that intention in the journal. After you've had the experience, then start writing your daily thoughts in the journal and compare them back to your original intention. As a simple example, let's say that your intention was to be a better person. So if this is what you set out to do, and this is the kind of stuff swimming through your head, then clearly there's a bit of a mismatch here, which would suggest you should spend some more time in letting these things settle down before taking any life-changing action. And that's not me saying that, it's you saying that. We can see the disparity here between these two things, so trust in yourself and find a way to get back to that original intention. This is why journaling is so useful, because not only does it give you a place to process these ideas, which is just as good as talk therapy in my opinion, but it also gives you a solid record of the journey you are on, including why you started that journey in the first place. Now, I've made a previous video on journaling, which I'll link to up there somewhere, so go check that out for a deeper dive into why I think it's useful. But just to summarize, start your journaling before taking psychedelics, so that you have a point of reference once your head is full of all these fantastical ideas. Anyway, I think that's all I have to say about introspection for the moment, so let's move on to the next part. The final step of this introductory process that we have so far is action. But it's worth unpacking this some more, and I'm going to stick with this weight loss example because it's easy and I think most of us will be able to relate to it. Now, within the bigger picture, actually just going on a diet isn't really the total solution. It's simply dealing with a symptom rather than the root cause. I mean, sure, I can go on a diet and lose weight, but is that really the totality of what the experience was trying to teach us? Probably not. Like I mentioned earlier, it would be a mistake to simply take the experience on face value and interpret that as, I need to lose weight, I'm gonna go on a diet. What's needed is some reflection on what that experience is actually trying to tell us and what the bigger picture is. And if we think about that bigger picture, it's not my body that I'm trying to change, it's the underlying behaviour and the reasons that I'm doing that behaviour in the first place. Now, if I can change the behaviour, then not only will the problem more or less fix itself, but it also has a much better chance of staying fixed because this change in lifestyle will support it. So again, let's stick with the simplified weight loss example. You might need to not only address your own diet, but also the people and the places that you hang around. Like if your social life involves hanging around lots of places with loads of tasty junk food, then you're going to need to change some stuff up. Otherwise, your old habits are going to quickly pull you back in. Now this sounds like common sense and it would be quite easy, but it's actually pretty fucking hard. And this is where some of that introspection we talked about earlier comes in. Because hopefully by now, we've managed to parse out what it is our visions are actually trying to communicate to us. And so now we need to think about how this message translates into action. And unfortunately, here is the thing that many people get wrong. They assume that simply because they've had this profound insight bundled up in a transcendent experience, that because they are feeling euphoric from the afterglow of the substance, then the easy mistake is to think that the hard work has already happened, that this new positive mental attitude is going to last forever, and that your lesson is just going to implement itself. Now, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but that is 100% not the case. If you don't take some kind of action in order to change your behaviour, then you will very quickly fall straight back into the same routine as before, and you're going to end up thinking, shit, why is this not working? Did I waste my opportunity? Am I a terrible person? And all these kind of thoughts can easily spiral into thinking that this whole thing was just a waste of time and you are a broken human being and all other sorts of unproductive thoughts. You have to do the work. And some of the work is done internally, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually. And in some cases, part of that work might be done externally in terms of the places we go, the things we do, and the people we associate with. Okay, so let's get back to our example of receiving a message, which seems to be about the things we are consuming. This one is actually pretty accurate for me because one time on an ayahuasca retreat in the Amazon, I had this exact message. Rob, you need to take care of yourself. Be mindful of the things you consume. This vessel that you occupy is sacred. So as previously discussed, I could feel the truth within this insight, and so I started exploring what the meaning was. I could just take it on face value because it was talking about consuming and taking care of myself, and so I think maybe it's simply about losing weight. But what I realized after a bit of introspection was that this was about my entire lifestyle. It's not just food I was consuming, but also certain drugs, digital junk food like clickbait media, the news, addictive video games, all this stuff I was putting into myself, and it just wasn't serving me in any way. In fact, I could see that these things were a complete waste of time. I wasn't even particularly enjoying them, and they were very destructive. So what is the action needed? Well, in my example, I did some fairly simple steps to help myself in the short term. I did go on a diet, and I stopped watching mainstream news, I unsubscribed from certain online forums full of toxic shitheads, etc, etc. And these are all good starting points, but I had to take it a bit further, because what you'll find is that when you prune out chunks of your life like this, then you're going to have to find some other, more wholesome stuff to fill that gap. Now, map that simple scenario onto your own experience. What was the message? What does that message translate into in the real world? And then what can you do to implement it? Who do you want to be? And what do you need to do to bring about that change? And what can you do to make these changes stick? These are the kind of actions that we are talking about. And again, this is a situation where journaling can help. Literally write down a bio for the person you want to be, and this will give you a point of reference to refer back to. Now, a couple of points to keep in mind here is to be realistic with your goals, and also the time frame within which these things can be accomplished. Don't fall into the trap of making it like a New Year's resolution where from the 1st of January we'll stop doing X, Y, and Z, and recognize instead that you are an ongoing project and that the goalposts are always moving. Life is not some sort of static journey with a defined endpoint. So it's not necessarily about reaching the end and then putting your feet up as if it's all good. It's about walking the path, and as long as you're walking that path, you're making progress. And the fact that you're making progress indicates that you have integrated or are in the process of integrating your experience. And this is what I believe is at the root of spirituality. It's not about going to church or talking pseudo-philosophical bullshit to inflate your ego. It's about embodying the person you want to be. Walk the walk, don't just talk the talk. Now, I have another video which does a deeper dive into this topic, so I'll leave a link to that at the top of the screen and go and check that out if you're interested. One final point is that during this integration process, it's not unusual at all to be on an emotional and psychological roller coaster with very intense feelings and thoughts occurring. And if you think about it from a rational perspective, what we're talking about here are life-changing decisions. And although I've used a simple example here around diet, then it could just as easily be applied to like deep-rooted trauma, which is going to have a powerful emotional core to it. But the techniques are the same. It boils down to who do you want to be? Now, when dealing with such trauma, then of course, turbulent feelings are going to arise, and that is completely normal. And I would encourage you to process them in the same way as how I've described. Integration is not some permanent blissful state where you're walking around feeling enlightened and happy and all your life just magically rearranges itself. That is not a realistic expectation, because depending on where you are coming from, it can be extremely challenging. But that is what you signed up for, so trust in yourself that this is what you want and that you can do this. So that is a very basic outline of the concept for integration, and I hope you'll find something useful in there which helps you in your own journey. There is a lot more I could say about this topic, so let me know in the comments below if you want me to go into even deeper detail, or you can join the Adeptus Psychonautica Discord server and come and have a chat with me and the other awesome people in our community. I want to give a big thank you to all my supporters on Patreon, whose names you can see here, and a special shout out to the following: Anthony Karsner, Amelia Kay, Andreas Hansen, Anthony Kalova, and Mark Dusenberry, who have all been extremely generous. And if you want to join these guys and support the channel, then the links to my Patreon are below. Also links to my Discord if you want to be part of the online community. Also my merch store if you want to buy a t-shirt, and pretty much anything else, all my social media links and all that stuff. Finally, I want to express my gratitude for all the positive messages I've received while I've been away ill. For anyone who doesn't know, both Rachel and I had that certain virus of unknown origin, and it completely wiped us out with like fever and delirium and all sorts of crazy shit. And so yeah, that absolutely sucked, but we are okay now, and thank you so much for your kind messages. So that's it for this video, and I will see you next time.